Nei Gong training is the internal development process of the Taoist tradition. It definitely has its roots in the alchemical teachings of Taoism, but at the same time other traditions such as Buddhism and Hinduism had very similar processes as well. There's almost certainly been a crossover or a sharing of information at some stage, probably several stages in the development of these traditions. But essentially what they were looking at was how to develop the efficiency and the effectiveness of the internal environment of the body. So Nei Gong training, according to the Taoist tradition, really works upon developing the body to a certain stage of efficiency. Then it moves on to development of the energetic system, the quality of the qi, the movement of energy within the body, primarily the yin and yang qi. And then at the later stages moves on to mental development, qualities of the mind and beyond, if people wish to take it in that direction. Now the first stage, the development of the body, is not, as people would necessarily think, it's not about making the body as strong or perfectly aligned as possible, although that's always good for your health. It's really about making the body as efficient as it can be at being a kind of circuit, a kind of electrical circuit for the movement of qi through the body. There's a series of teachings that develop the internal environment of the body in a very specific manner so that it's able to conduct, store and align energy in a very specific fashion. After this, the energy system needs developing and turning on. Ultimately, it needs waking up because most people's energy system is pretty dormant. And the first stage of this is development of the dantian. So the dantian, or the lower energy field, the elixir field that we're developing, is kind of like a rechargeable battery that needs building up and developing in the body. But for most people, when they begin, they don't really have much of a dantian. It's kind of a misunderstanding in Qigong that you kind of pick up a Qigong book and they talk about the dantian, the lower energy center, with the assumption that you definitely have one. The truth is that you have one when you were younger, when you were a kid, but once you got past a certain age, it kind of dispersed or kind of decreased with regards to efficiency. So we need to build this up. So we talk about reshaping or forming the container of the dantian, and there's a process to do this. Once the container of the dantian is developed, then we fill it, which ultimately means that we direct the electrical energy of the body that moves through the nervous system into the dantian region. And we have very specific practices in order to do this within Nei Gong training. This lower energy center, this rechargeable battery, then becomes the foundation for everything else we do. So a lot of Nei Gong is then about opening the channel system up and getting the qi to move efficiently through the body. Because the channels and the qi are an extension of the quality of the mind, this has various transformational influences or effect upon your emotional and cognitive mind as well. So there is a whole kind of psychological process that the body goes through while it's healing, while it's moving through the Nei Gong process. Now the qi that moves through the body, we need to increase this, and we need to increase its effectiveness as an efficiency, and this is what a lot of Nei Gong is based upon, is taking a person through this process, which has all sorts of benefits with regards to the effectiveness of the body's functioning and your health and your mental well-being. But as well as this, people use Nei Gong then as a springboard into one of the other arts, whether it be to develop martial skill or medical skill, or use it as to take you further on the trajectory of spiritual development. You know, it doesn't really matter, it can be used for all of these things. Nei Gong forms the kind of engine or the fuel for this process. A lot of times what people don't realize is actually the internal process is very tangible and very somatically experienceable. It's not something that's vague, it's not something that's faint. You don't use your imagination, we don't use visualization, we don't picture things. We actually use a kind of internal, almost scientific process to develop a specific mechanism on the inside of the body that changes the way that our internal environment functions. There are very classical teachings on it, and very strict methods, using the breath, using the body, and using various tools, moving as static exercises that build this dantian. Another thing that's often not realized is that which changes on the level of energy also changes on the level of body, on manifestations. So there are some physiological transformations that take place in the body as well. Qigong can sometimes be a little bit vague, Nei Gong is not. It's a very tangible experience. I would say that those who wish to engage in the Nei Gong process should be aware that it's strong, it's effective, and what it does is it leads you towards understanding and accessing the internal mechanisms that were inherent within the Taoist tradition. Primarily I teach from within Northern Taoism and their take on on alchemy and their take on Nei Gong. But as well as this, I've also studied parallel traditions within Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism, and I've also been and seen how Nei Gong, or their version of Nei Gong, is practiced in Southeast Asia in everything from local communities through to tribal practitioners who have very, very similar mechanisms involved in what they're doing. They have a different name for it, but ultimately it's Nei Gong, and some of these traditions even link their practice back to China in the first place. So Nei Gong is not a practice that's unique to China, but perhaps we could say that China is either the root of it or they preserved it. Certainly there's an argument that Nei Gong may have come in from Indian traditions. There's a lot of links with yogic or Hindu theory, but the Chinese are very good at making something systematic and preserving something. So this branch of Nei Gong, the Chinese branch, is primarily what we teach within the school. One thing that often surprises people when they start engaging with the Nei Gong process is just how tangible the experiences are. They're often quite shocked at first. And it's something that I've seen over and over again throughout the years, is just how people are fascinated by the internal arts. And sometimes people have practiced them for years, but been stuck with a very faint sensation, kind of on the level of nerves, feeling tingling, feeling heat, feeling cold, or something like this. But actually, once you step over the threshold into authentic Nei Gong training, it's very, very strong and very, very clear to experience. It's not like you're working blind when you're moving through this process. For a lot of people, what they need to do is relax and open the body. There's a lot of development of this. We need to get the body open, largely so that somebody is comfortable within their own body. That's very important. And then we develop the body so that certain qualities are there. The center of gravity must be in the correct place. The correct mechanism with regards to your tissues must be there. And then we seek to elasticate the inside of the body and start to make it more conductive, so that ultimately it directs the energy that we're developing within our practice in the right way through the body. After this, there's a whole process of kind of unraveling of the kind of movement of yang qi through the system. So classically they would just call these blockages in the channels, and I'm sure if you've been involved in the internal arts at all, you've heard about blockages. You know, we need to free up the blockages. But what we're really talking about is sort of bindings and adhesions that exist at the level of the kind of tissues where the nerves are running. So what's happening is when that yang qi, which is largely an electrical energy, is moving through the nervous system, as it hits these adhesions, then we can use this to kind of unravel and remove them from the system, which ultimately means the area of the body has less resistance, it's more conductive, and then the energy can move through this part of the body as well. Now, because the mind and the body are inextricably linked, the body is a kind of holographic representation of all of your memories and experiences and emotional makeup and so on and so on, everything that we call the acquired mind within alchemical teachings. So when this energy moves through and frees up these adhesions or clears these blockages from the system, then what happens is your body starts to release this kind of old trauma or these old memories or the kind of, the physical manifestation of the mental experiences that you have. And this is what the opening up process is. The byproduct of this going on is obviously that feedback loop back into the mind means that you generally become more centered, more calm, and move towards a place that's more conducive with A, enjoying life a great deal more, and B, if you want to take it in your training into spiritual development, then it's a lot more conducive to actually moving into encountering spirit, or moving into kind of some of these higher things that you read about within classical texts, classical Taoist texts. So as the energy releases, these adhesions are removed from the system, then there are some specific results, and they're kind of similar to the kriya that people talk about in yoga, spontaneous kriya or something like this, where the body might sort of shake or tremble or twitch or something like this. This is a temporary process that the body goes through as it frees up these adhesions from the channels. One way to think of Nei Gong is, if you understand, or the process the body goes through in Nei Gong, is if you think of Chinese medicine and what it does, how the acupuncture needles work to harmonize the quality of yin and yang and qi within the body, it's kind of the same, but it's coming from within you instead of from without. So for example, an acupuncturist may put needles into the body, and ultimately that's something from the outside, needles influencing your inside to create a change. But Nei Gong is a little different because the transformation comes from inside you. It's the innate intelligence of the body is kind of accessed and allowed to come to the surface. So the body, your body and your mind knows what needs to be freed up way more than any Chinese medical practitioner ever will. And this is coming from someone who is a Chinese medical practitioner. So the resultant effects of the practice are essentially like Chinese medicine, but a lot stronger, okay, a lot more effective, because it comes from the inside of the body. All we do is we gently guide that process through various exercises and movements and postures, essentially very classical and traditional exercises, to try to kind of gently nudge this internal awakening process or this cleansing process in the right direction. But ultimately, we give the body control. This is one of the most important principles within Taoism, is to non-govern or to non-control. They call it Wu Wei, but ultimately it means that our conscious mind wants to step back and simply pay attention to what the body requires. So when the body has this attention given to it, plus the increase of energy, of qi that comes from the dantian and from the practice itself, then everything is required by everything that the body requires in order to move through this cleansing process is then there. This is all a part of the foundation of the process of Nei Gong. How do we make the body function more efficiently? How do we increase the health? And how do we open these channels up? This is really where our emphasis is for a really long time. The other side of this training is immense fun. It can be hard work at times, physically, and it can be complex as well, but the process is always enjoyable, and one of the greatest pleasures is watching everybody come together to kind of share and work through this process and kind of allow the internal evolution process that's inherent within Nei Gong to unfold for them. It makes it a great pleasure to teach.